Hello everyone, welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. I am Ritu and today we are going to discuss an important topic of polity and IR, which is G20 Summit 2023. And as you all know that this topic is important from GS2 perspective. So before moving to the points of discussion, first of all, we'll have a brief background about G20 Summit. So from where this discussion has been started. So this discussion has been started since collapse of Soviet Union, and which also resulted the collapse and end of the Cold War, and so many economies were dependent on the Soviet Union. So when Soviet Union collapsed, so many economies also collapsed. So there was a serious discussion about the global economic problem, and so many countries had thought about that there should be a platform where all countries will be united and they will discuss the common economic problems. But this thing has been not seriously taken on that day. But in 1997 there was a serious economic problem in Asian countries, and so many East Asian countries' economies were in crippled situation. So they had seriously thought about this thing, and they had formed this grouping, G22 grouping, in which 22 countries had taken part. Later, it has become the G33 group, in which 33 countries had took part. But in 1999, it has been come to the serious discussion, and it has become G20 group, which is now G20 group, in which 19 countries are participant and one there is a European Union. So when this crisis came at that time, a European Union president was France. So they were discussing that whom to contact about this thing. So they had asked from the G7, but G7 leaders are not just influential one. So they had discussed this thing with the G20 leaders, because in which so many economic and powerful countries were there. So they had decided that they will go with this G20 country. So this is the brief introduction about G20 summit. And it had came into discussion since 2008, because since 2008 there was so many global financial crisis coming to the world, and it was the huge financial crisis after Great Depression. So all the countries united together and they had thought seriously about this problem, and they had seriously thought about that there should be annual summit regarding the economic problems of the world. And since that time, media has taken attention toward this G20 grouping, and it has come into the public picture. So this is the brief about G20 and its background. So moving to the points of discussion. So first of all, we will discuss the news and its relevance from exams perspective, and then a brief introduction about G20, and then we are going to discuss that who is going to attend this time and who are not attending, and then we are going to discuss that what has happened so far. Like we had earlier meeting regarding G20. So what were the development in those meeting, and then we are going to discuss about that what will happen in 2023 G20 summit, which means that what will happen on 9th and 10th September, and then we are going to discuss practice question for prelims and mains. So moving to the news part. So we all know that on 9th and 10th September, India is going to host G20 leaders. And where it is going to host? So it is going to host in New Delhi, which is the capital of India. So this is the brief news, and in this only not G20 leaders are invited, all the other leaders are also invited. So, and they are not just going to discuss about the economic problems, they are also going to discuss about the socio and political issues. So this is a brief news about today's topic. So moving to the next slide. So next slide is about a brief introduction of G20. We had already discussed the background, that from where it has been started. So in this slide, we will discuss about that what is the present form of the G20. So we all know that G20 is a grouping of 19 countries and one European Union. So you may wonder that why it is called G20, because in European Union there are so many countries are also participant, and in your prelims exam it can also play like that, the G20 is a grouping of 20 countries, but you should always remember that G20 is a grouping of 19 plus EU. So this would be your correct statement. And who are the participants? So we can see the name of few countries like Argentina, Australia, Brazil, India also, Republic of Korea also, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia. So these are the important countries who are part of the G20 grouping. And so what G20 grouping comprise? So it comprise 85% of the global GDP, 75% of the global trade, and 2/3 of the world's population. So this is very influential in this term, and it strengthens the global architecture and governance on economic and financial issues. So this is a brief introduction about G20, and it also works on Trioca form. What is this Trioca? It means that its presidency is decided on Trioca formula. It means that previous presidency and then present presidency and the future presidency. So this is a TRIOCA formula. So who were the previous presidencies? So this time we had Indonesia, and this time we have India, and in 2024 we'll have Brazil. So this is the TRIOCA form. Moving to the next slide. So next slide is about what are the objective of the G20. So we can see the objective. So the first objective is policy coordination between its members, and they will focus on the global economic stability and sustainable growth, which is very important because this time India is going to focus on the sustainability. And the second objective is to promote financial regulation and to provide and to reduce all the country the risk from the future financial issues. And they will also focus on to creation of new international financial architecture. It means they will maybe focus on a common bank and so many other financial entities. So these are the objective. So moving to the next slide. So next slide is about that who are going to attend this time. So this time India has not just invited just G20 leaders. They had also invited important other world leaders, and around 40 world leaders are invited. And it has been anticipated, we are not sure about the presence of the leaders, but it has been anticipated that President Joe Biden of United States will be there. The Premier of State Council Li Qiang of China will be there. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will be there. South Korean President will be there. French President will be there. And Canadian Prime Minister will be there. And who are the other participants? So who are the notable absentees this time? So we can see that Ukraine is absent this time. So you may wonder that why Ukraine is absent this time, because first of all Ukraine is not part of the G20 summit, and the second thing is that India has not invited Ukraine. So Ukraine is not taking part this time, and on the other hand so many countries had not confirmed their presence, such as Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Mexico, Japan, Italy, Germany, Indonesia, Brazil and Argentina. So we can see that there are so many countries who are part of G20 summit, still they have not confirmed their presence. So moving to the next slide. So India had also invited few guest countries who are going to take part in this G20 summit, and among them Bangladesh is there, Egypt is there, Mauritius is there, UAE is there, Oman is there. So we can see that India had not just invited country from the Asian country, they had also invited country from all over the world. So these are the guest countries who are going to take part in today's G20 summit. So moving to the next slide. So next slide is about what has happened at this year G20 meeting. Because we know that this is not the first time that G20 leaders are meeting in New Delhi. Before that so many ministerial meeting had been happened, and around 13 ministerial meeting had been happened regarding G20. So what are the developments in those meetings we are going to discuss in this slide. So first of all we'll look for the finance ministers and central bank governors meeting, because this whole G20 is mostly or largely based on the economic issues and financial issues. So we will more focus around economic and financial issues. So what we have seen that what had happened and what is the highlight of this ministerial meeting, that they will focus on the international policy cooperation on the global economic towards securing strong, sustainable and balanced and inclusive growth. So we can see that sustainable word is common in every forum. And what had happened in tourism ministerial meeting, that they will work on green tourism. So they will work on basically 5 tourism principle. The first thing is that green tourism, digitalization, skills, tourism, MSMEs and destination management. And they will also work on the gender equality, and they will empower women through that their participation should be increased in the tourism sector. So we have seen that there was so many tourism sector is growing, but they are not eco-friendly in nature. So through this G20 summit they are going to discuss about that, how to promote tourism through eco-friendly way, and they will also discuss and focus on the MSME, because so many countries have so many small skills which are unrecognized. So they are going to recognize such skill. So moving to the next slide. So next slide is about environment and climate ministers meeting, because in today's era environment concern is very important, and all the leaders are part of various economic and environment forum. So they are going to discuss about the environment issues, and that is very important for the today's environmental crisis. So they are going to work on few principles. So they are going to work on sustainable and resilient blue ocean based economy, because in today's time marine economy and blue economy is very important, and marine resources are deteriorating day by day. So it's very important to take care of the marine resources. And they are also going to discuss about that whatever the expectation we have from the developed countries, So they are not able to reduce their pollution level, their zero emission level. So there is no popular consensus made that there should be a zero emission level. So this is very wrong from the developed country side. So maybe in this meeting they are going to solve this issue. So moving to the next slide. So next slide is about health ministers meeting, because recently we have seen that the world has seen that there is a pandemic and whole world has suffered, the economy has suffered, the health has suffered. So this thing is very important to discuss in G20 summit. So they will be discussed and focus on the global initiative on digital health. Through this they will share different kind of knowledge which is very important for the whole world, and they are going to focus about trade and investment ministerial meeting, where they will focus on digitalization of the trade documents, generic mapping framework for GVC, and they had highly focused on the Jaipur call for action. And what is this Jaipur call for action is about? So they will focus on the enhancement and advancement of MSMEs. And here not just MSME of India will be there, MSME of whole world will be there, and they will promote MSME throughout the world. So moving to the next slide. So next slide is about agriculture ministers meeting. So we all know that India is an agricultural prone country, and we have so many economies which are based on agriculture. Around 60% of the population is based on the agriculture. So it is very important to discuss about the agricultural situation, because agriculture who provides grains to the whole world. So they had discussed about the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and we had also lectured about the Black Sea Grain Initiative which Russia had not continued, and they had also discussed about the Ukraine war. Later China had said that in final declaration there should be not naming of the Ukraine war, and there will be no any favorable result towards Ukraine. So there is no final consensus made on the Ukraine and Russia situation, but they had discussed about the Black Sea Grain Initiatives. And they had also agreed to the 7-Deccan High Level Principle on Food Security and Nutrition 2023. So this is a brief about the Agriculture Ministerial's meeting. So moving to the next slide. Next slide is about what is the agenda for upcoming 2023 G20. So there is no concrete agenda set for the upcoming G20 summit, but there are few issues which are going to be discussed, and according to White Houses, they are going to discuss about the clean energy transition and combating climate change. So they are not just focusing towards the economic issues, they are also focusing towards the environmental issues, socio and political issues. They are also going to discuss about Russia and Ukraine war and what its social and economic impact. So this is the White House declaration, and this time we have theme of 𝐸𝐶𝐻𝑒𝑣 𝑘ُटुम्बकम्, which means one earth, one family and one future, and India is going to highly focus on sustainability. So we have seen that in many declarations they had discussed about the sustainable future, sustainable development. So it's core theme of India that they will discuss about the sustainability, that how to use the resources in a sustainable manner. So this is the agenda for upcoming 2023 G20. In the next class we will discuss that what had happened in the summit. So moving to the next slide. Next slide is about what other agenda they are going to discuss. So there is a new agenda which is called as Voice of the Global South. So first of all, we should know that what is this Voice of the Global South. So India is declaring itself as a Voice of the Global South. So Voice of the Global South consists the economic countries or developing countries who are in a phase of developing, like Asian countries, Latin American countries, African countries, and India. Maybe they will also discuss on the LAC issues along with the China. So these are the speculation we are going to discuss about in upcoming G20 issues. So moving to the next slide. So next slide is about practice question for prelims. Which of the following countries are not a member of G20? They're asking for not a member, and your options are United Kingdom, Turkey, Israel and Saudi Arabia. You have to answer this in the comment section. So moving to the mains part. So what is the mains question? So the mains question is how the presidency of G20 has given opportunity to India as a voice of global South. So we had discussed that among many agenda, India is going to discuss and focus on the voice of global South. So first of all, in introduction, you have to give that what is this global South. So you have to discuss that who are the countries who are a part of the global South, like developing economies are part of the global South whose voices are unheard. So India is declaring itself that on this summit they are going to discuss about the voices of the global South whose voices are unheard, whose problems are unheard. So this is the introduction you will write in this answer, and then going to the main part. What is the main part? That how the presidency of G20 has given opportunity to India. So you have to discuss that, how India has emerged itself as a voice of the global south. So in the recent G7 summit, India has highly discussed about this voice of the global south, and they had discussed about the problems of these country, and they had also discussed that, we share the common features and we have the common history. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that, we all the country have the common history, who had faced the colonialism problem, who had faced the apartheid problem. So we share the common history. That's why I am here India is becoming the voice of the global south. And in the BRICS summit also, he had discussed about the problems of the global south. So we can see that, India is not advocating this voice of the global south from the G20 perspective. It is advocating it on the G7 summit, on the BRICS summit. And in the pandemic situation, we can see that how India has emerged as a voice of the global south. India has exported around 100 countries the vaccines, and around 150 countries has imported medicines from the India. So India is, helping other countries, and it is becoming the voice of the global south. So in this way, you will conclude your answer. I hope you like this lecture. If you have any queries related to this lecture, kindly ask in the comment section. Thank you.